What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of LTMB Live. Let the madness begin. We should probably introduce ourselves.
I know because I'm pretty sure they maybe forgot our names.
It's been a minute. But I am Will Gaillard,
and I'm Mike White.
Yeah, we are LTMB
in the flesh.
Yeah,
finally.
We do political analysis. We do some news coverage, stuff like that.
We new to the game.
Yeah, a little bit, just a little bit new to the game.
It feels like we're new to the game.
It
because
does.
When you, let's say, when we miss a week.
Yeah, this has been almost 2 weeks. Almost 2 weeks now.
So even when we miss one show, it seems like we have a lot of catching up to do.
Right.
So we've now broadcasted for 2 weeks. So
unintentional, really, but it just came together like that. So no doubt we missed a lot of things that were going on in the world and in this country. We missed the opportunity to speak on really some of those things we of course are still going to talk about as they're still relevant. Tonight's coverage, Wednesday, not a usual night for LTMB, but a special coverage because of the presidential debate last night, the Democratic presidential debate.
If you want to call it that.
Yeah. This was most unlike a debate than any of the other ones. It was a show. It was definitely a show.
It was definitely. I don't know.
Had a purpose behind it.
I'm trying to find the right description. Maybe a coordinated ambush. You know what I'm saying?
Coordinated ambush.
Coordinated ambush.
You like that?
You like that?
Okay. Yeah. Orchestrated. Yeah. It was.
But see, I should have seen it coming because I was watching the pre-debate coverage, and Van Jones was speaking.
Is that right?
That should
you know how we like Van
that
Jones.
should just be the punchline. Van Jones was speaking. But he was talking about how this debate should be about the other candidates piling on Bernie Sanders since he's the front runner. He said that Bernie Sanders hasn't been piled onto yet in the debate. And I was like,
Bernie Sanders has.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders. I was like, that's not true. But anyway,
okay.
I just listened to him continue. And he said that's what the debate should be about. It should be about the other candidates piling on to Bernie Sanders. The reason being, he said, the Bernie Sanders is seen as the front runner now.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, so I was wondering why, the coverage from CNN and MSNBC has been slightly different. Did you notice how?
Oh, yes.
You noticed that?
Yeah.
How they started talking about Bernie being a viable candidate and all this stuff. Yeah. I was like, what is this about?
Changed the tune.
This doesn't make any sense. So I was just putting two and two together based on what Van Jones was talking about. And I was like, I see what they're doing. It's like they weren't lifting him up because they genuinely respect him. They just wanted to lift him up to make him a target. Oh yeah, see, since he's the front runner, let's go after him in the debate.
In the most devious type of way that's possible. But again, we should have knew what they were trying to set up. But like I said, we're going to get into that. We're going to get into all of that. A lot to talk about, especially one particular topic is definitely going to be a lot of the coverage that we have. One particular.
Wonder what that is.
One particular topic.
I wonder what that could be.
Of course.
Wonder what that could be. I'm pretty sure they have no clue.
No clue whatsoever. It's going to be a surprise. We are broadcasting live on Twitch, YouTube, and Periscope Live. So thank you, everybody, for joining us once again. Like I said, it's been a long time, but glad to see you back with us tonight. I guess we should just go into it. When we do these and analysis shows of these presidential Democratic debates, we always have some clips for you. So, just like always, we're going to go through it, from the top to the bottom, from, what happens, try to follow the timeline
the flow of the
flow
debate.
of the debate.
Yeah.
We are going to kind of get out of that for a minute, though, because there's a lot to talk about on one particular issue. So we're going to have a hefty amount of coverage on that particular issue and then get back to
I think that's a good thing, considering that, like, this debate was probably the wackest debate.
Yeah, it was.
Out of all of them,
it was the worst.
And
It was the worst. I mean, it's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was the worst.
Yo,
The
like,
worst.
my Twitter feed was ridiculous. Like, the whole debate and after debate, like, I had to shut myself down and get off of Twitter.
Yeah.
Because if I didn't, then I would be on it all night.
How many social media minutes did you expend?
Yo. I went over my data. I went over my social minutes data. I have like a limit that I have, like that I can like respond and be on social media, just like responding to people and getting engaged. I try to limit myself. Yo, I blew that out the water the past 48 hours.
Blew it out.
It's done. It's done for the rest of the year.
Dang, the year just started.
I know that's what I'm saying.
All right, but let's get to it, okay? Let's stop stalling. Let's get to it. All right. So this was the 7th Democratic debate, presidential debate, and this one took place in Iowa. We talked about this one being the last one before the first test, the first caucus that's in Iowa, and that's set to be at, I believe, Tuesday. So that's Senators Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Amy Klobuchar. So again, we don't know how much that's going to harm their campaigns, harm their chances or whatnot. I mean, they've already done an extensive campaigning. People know who they are. These are the top 6 candidates right now. So I'm not certain how disparaging it will be or how damaging it will be to their candidacy. But still, they will be off the campaign trail for a little bit.
I know a lot of people have floated that as a reason why Nancy Pelosi held off impeachment. I don't think that's the case. Based on our coverage of the impeachment inquiry and all the information that hadn't come out, I kind of figured why she held off, and I don't think the motive was to kneecap anyone's campaign. I'm not saying it's a completely ridiculous, speculation, but I just don't think that's the case. I think Bernie Sanders or any other candidate can adjust to that.
Yeah. I think so.
And the campaign is bigger than one person.
Yeah.
He still has a team of volunteers, campaign staff.
Sure,
and
there's still going to be events.
Yeah.
So anyway, again, this one was in Iowa. So they were speaking in front of the first test in the state where the first caucus is going to be for election season 2020. So the debate started out with foreign policy, and that's, that wasn't surprising given what has happened with Iran, the killing of Soleimani, just increased tensions, Iran firing rockets at the bases in Iraq, all of this. So again, it wasn't surprising that's where the debate started. So what we're going to hear from Bernie Sanders first, and the question is, why are you the best option, best prepared to become the next commander-in-chief with regards to foreign policy?
Senator Sanders, why are you the best prepared person on this stage to be commander-in-chief?
Yes, I think my record speaks to that, Wolf. In 2002, when the Congress was debating whether or not we go into a war in Iraq, invade Iraq, I got up on the floor of the House and I said that would be a disaster. It would lead to unprecedented levels of chaos in the region. And I not only voted against the war, I helped lead the effort against that war. Just last year, I helped, for the first time in the modern history of this country, pass a War Powers Act resolution working with a conservative Republican, Mike Lee of Utah, which said that the war in Yemen, led by Saudi Arabia, was unconstitutional because Congress had not authorized it. We got a majority vote in the Senate. We got a majority vote in the House. Unfortunately, Bush vetoed that, and that horrific war continues. I am able to work with Republicans. I am able to bring people together to try to create a world where we solve conflicts over the negotiating table, not through military efforts.
All right, so I believe that was a pretty good answer from Bernie Sanders. I didn't like the part too much about how he's able to work with Republicans. It didn't do anything for me. I understand how it might sound on the stage.
Yeah,
it
sounds good on the stage.
Yeah, I can work with Republicans on some areas. I can work with some Republicans at least on the issue of foreign policy. There's a lot of conversation about bipartisanship and this and that. So I understand why he did. It doesn't do much for me. But I like where he went with, of course, his opposition to the Iraq war. And, of course, the U.S. involvement in the Yemen war as well. Because he has been steadfast in that regard at a time when really nobody else was with him. It was only, I think it was only 2 other senators that was with him. And that was just trying to get a conversation started about ending the U.S. involvement in the Yemen war. And that was Senators Mike Lee and I believe Murphy as well, Democratic senator. So, yes, he's been very consistent. He has been very anti-war. And in regards to the Yemen war, it wasn't until the Washington Post journalist Khashoggi was viciously murdered, decapitated, or chopped up, really. I mean, it wasn't until that in
Bonesaw.
Yeah,
he got bonesaw.
Exactly. It wasn't until that is when the rest of the Senate, I guess, had an opposition to the U.S. involvement in the Yemen war. So it wasn't really, I can't say that was really real.
They had Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden standing side by side, right?
They did.
I mean, we already know that most likely that's due to them being front runners.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a good juxtaposition, especially for a question like this, considering all the footage that has been released recently with Joe Biden's, position on the Iraq war,
Right.
And then some fallout. Well, specific type of fallout from a specific group in regard to the video that Bernie Sanders put out about him being on the right side of history when it came to, war and stuff like that. So I think it was important to kind of keep those two together and go from a back and forth between those two. And that's what happened during the debate when this question came up.
And so we're going to hear from Biden next. And like you just mentioned, there has been a lot of talk about Biden and what was his true position back in the day, because he's trying to engage in revisionist history. His campaign is trying to do the same, trying to sell the message that he was always against the Iraq war. And history just doesn't tell that story. But anyway, so the question goes to former Vice President Joe Biden on why he is best prepared to become the next commander-in-chief.
Vice President Biden, you talk a lot about your experience, but some of your competitors have taken issue with that experience, questioning your judgment in voting to authorize the Iraq war. Why are you the best prepared person on this stage to be commander-in-chief?
I said 13 years ago it was a mistake to give the president the authority to go to war if, in fact, he couldn't get inspectors into Iraq to stop what thought to be the attempt to get a nuclear weapon. It was a mistake, and I acknowledge that. But the man who also argued against that war, Barack Obama, picked me to be his vice president. And once we were elected president, and vice president, he turned to me and asked me to end that war.
William, I got a question for you, bro. When was the Iraq war? Sorry, when did it start?
2003.
2003. So that was what, 17 years ago?
About 17 years ago.
Okay, what did Biden say at the beginning there?
Right here? Right here, last night at the debate.
Yeah, that clip you just played. What did he say at the beginning? Something about he said it was a mistake. How many years ago?
Yeah, he said 13.
He said I said it was a mistake 13 years ago.
13 years ago.
Do the math.
Yeah. 13 is not 17. 13.
That was pretty quick. 17. That was pretty quick.
Yeah. 13 years ago would put you at around
4 years after the war started. So why is that significant? And then I think he mentioned something about weapons inspectors being allowed in. And he wouldn't agree with it unless it was about weapons inspectors being allowed in.
Right.
And I was like, well, to me, that's kind of some pointless details to me, because the primary issue here is it wasn't 13 years ago. It was 17 years ago.
True.
So, and also, like, I like how he name dropped Obama there. Again, he's good for doing that. Like, he mentioned that Obama was against the war. Okay. So you want credit? You want some sort of like extended credit because you were his VP? So does that now mean you were against the war now because Barack Obama was against the war? But again, he's on this like, I did everything tip. Well, Barack Obama turned to me.
Yep.
And he said, I need you to end it.
It's familiar. This is what Joe Biden does. He name drops Obama. Really, this answer is boiled down to a few simple words: because Obama. Obama believed in me, therefore I am anti-war.
And Obama believed in me, therefore you should too.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. Now, this wasn't his entire answer, but that was the relevant portion of it. Because, I mean, he's selling a bunch of BS. We know what his past remarks were. And it's not just about being wrong per se about the Iraq war. It's about your judgment, because you're running for the highest office in this land, in this country. You're running to become the next president of the United States. And in regards to foreign policy, it's been said before that was most likely the worst foreign policy decision in the U.S. history. I mean, one can argue against that or for it or whatever, but it was definitely one of the worst moves ever.
I guess because it was so recent.
Yeah. And he was on the side
Vietnam
that
was probably worse, but in recent history.
But he was on the side of affording George W. Bush and the Republicans, Cheney. He was on the side of affording them that much power to take us to war on nothing, because the goal was to root out the terrorists, get the terrorists that were responsible for 9/11.
And the weapons, WMDs.
Yeah, but that was a lie.
That was
too.
yeah.
So again, this is all about judgment. Okay, you can say like there were a lot of people, there were a lot of Democrats that voted for it, and I don't know if we can just continue saying, hey, well, write every single one of them off. And I don't know that if you can continuously do that. Maybe if they have said, man, that was really bad and this and that. I don't know that you throw every single one of them in the garbage. But for somebody like Joe Biden to assert that really he did nothing wrong. I mean, well, no, he says he made the wrong decision, but it's not emblematic of his foreign policy outlook. Like,
well, it would have made sense for him to, I guess, explain how his foreign policy outlook has been adjusted. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Because in 2020, I think it is pretty clear that at this point, in the game, almost there's almost like a consensus about the Iraq War.
Yes.
So if you don't really come clean in regard to how you reflect on it, I do think that says something about your leadership, and it doesn't look like he's coming completely clean about that.
He lacks the introspection.
And it even looks worse. Remember, that I think it was a couple weeks ago. It's kind of whack. I'm not going to. I already feel some way about Nancy Pelosi. I don't need any more ammo to feel any more distrustful. But a couple of weeks ago, she said something about the Iraq War in the Bush administration, and that she knew that they were lying. A lot of people got mad at her. I was like, there was a lot of people at that time who knew that Bush was lying, but the environment at that time, your political career was over.
Right.
If you came against that war.
Right. There was so much support for the troops.
Troops and all that.
Yeah.
I do think it's weird that Nancy Pelosi is like, yeah, we all knew he lied. But Joe Biden is sitting up here not really being forthright about that, even though we all know it was a lie. And most, I think regardless of whether you vote Democrat or Republican, I think both sides can say, yeah, it was probably a lie.
Yeah.
And voters and politicians who represent their parties pretty much have the same thing to say about the Iraq War. So at this point in time, at this day and age, if you're not being completely transparent about the part you played in that, and then reflect upon that,
Right.
and allow that to lead to kind of a new vision about your foreign policy, then that's poor leadership. He just seems a bit unwilling to accept that he was on the wrong side of history.
Yeah, he will say it was a mistake, but again, it doesn't. He doesn't allow it to say anything about himself. He doesn't go far enough. Again, you can be reflective about your past decisions. You can be reflective about errors that you made, and say, "Man, that was a real blunder. This is not the way I wanted it to go." And this and that. He does not give off the impression that he is anti-war in any regards whatsoever. If you hear his comments back then, there's no way you can get that impression that he was anti-war. What he said fit the narrative of, yeah, I'm for this war. So what he's trying to do now is completely disingenuous. All right, so let's keep going. Next question is going to go to Elizabeth Warren. It's the same question. Why are you best in terms of foreign policy? Why are you best prepared to become the next commander-in-chief?
I believe the principal job of the commander-in-chief is to keep America safe. And I think that's about judgment. I think it starts with knowing our military. I sit on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I work with our generals, with our military leaders, with our intelligence. But I also visit our troops. I visit our troops around the world. I've been to Afghanistan, to Iraq, to Jordan, to South Korea. I've been to lots of places to talk with our troops. And I fight for our troops to make sure that they get their pay, that they get the housing and medical benefits that they've been promised, that they don't get cheated by giant financial institutions. You know, I have 3 brothers who are in the military, and I know how much our military families sacrifice. But I also know that we have to think about our defense in very different ways. We have to think about cyber. We have to think about climate. We also have to think about how we spend money. We have a problem with a revolving door in Washington between the defense industry and the Department of Defense and the Pentagon. That is corruption, pure and simple. We need to block that revolving door, and we need to cut our defense budget. We need to depend on all of our tools, diplomatic, economic, working with our allies, and not let the defense industry call the shots.
Those are some really interesting comments by Senator Elizabeth Warren. If I'm correct, she said something about decreasing the military budget.
Cut. She used the word cut.
She did use the word cut. She used the word
cut. What does cut mean to you, Will?
Decrease. It means decrease.
Not necessarily.
I mean,
if I take this paper and I cut it, I still have the same amount of paper.
well, it suggests. It definitely suggests.
I'm just trying to get her out of it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
If I cut the paper, literally, did I lose any paper?
You didn't lose any paper.
Maybe
No.
that's what she's talking about.
I choose not. No. She was trying to sell the idea that she is pro cutting the military budget. That means limiting and reducing the military budget.
No, why don't you think that's true, William?
There was this thing that she did.
This thing that she did.
Back in the day, I believe this was
Back in the day, like a long time ago.
I mean,
Long time ago.
not that long.
Oh, okay. It
Not
wasn't.
that
It was.
long.
It wasn't an old school move.
It was a couple years ago. You know, I mean, I can't call that old school. I can call it a couple years ago. But yeah, she voted to increase the military budget. I'm not sure how that jives with her current position here. And so look, we've talked about this before. And you know what? And we can play this video once again. Emma Vigeland from TYT, she asked Senator Elizabeth Warren about this. This was months ago.
You have focused a lot on progressive domestic policy. You also voted for a military budget increase in 2017. How does that square with your progressive politics when we're talking about foreign policy?
If the question is, do I think we should cut the military budget, the answer is yes. And I'm now on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I've had this fight over and over. But there's another part to it too. We need to stop the control over our defense budget that's exercised by the giant defense industry. As you know, we now have a Secretary of Defense who spent 7 years as head lobbyist for Raytheon. I asked for some simple conflict of interest rules that he would abide by. For example, not to make decisions that involve Raytheon and Raytheon's bottom line. And he refused. The Republicans confirmed him anyway. But this is what corruption is all about. Putting lobbyists in charge of our government agencies, a lobbyist, former lobbyist in charge of the Environmental Protection Agency. This is the heart of corruption. And the moment has come to call it out and to fight back. That's what being in this room was.
Again, we talked about this when we saw this clip, and we talked about it on the show. She seems to be understanding of the corruption and the wasteful spending of the U.S. military. So why did you vote to increase the military budget for 2018? That was a clear question that you were asked. Her answer was that if you're asking me, should we cut it? Then yeah, I agree. But that's not really.
Then she started talking about wasteful spending and corruption.
Again,
in the middle. Like, yeah, okay.
If you already know all this, then why didn't that let you guide your decision?
That's the reason why Emma asked you that question, because she assumed that your position was,
right.
There's a lot of corruption in the military-industrial complex.
So
there's a lot of wasteful spending. That's why the question was,
yes.
Put towards her. I was like, hey, if you stated these positions before, so why did you vote to increase the budget?
Her vote doesn't match her commentary. And it was a question about the future as much as it was about the past, too, your past vote. And again, she didn't answer. And the only problem that I have, well, not the only problem, but one of the biggest problems I have with what happened last night when she gave this answer was that she didn't receive any pushback. Specifically, I'm looking at Bernie Sanders. I think it's common knowledge that she voted to increase the military budget for 2018. And I believe Bernie Sanders said as much. Now, he didn't specifically name drop Elizabeth Warren. I believe this happened at the last debate. But he said that he was the only one on the stage, I believe, that never voted to increase the military budget. I believe he said something like that. So it definitely was alluding to Elizabeth Warren and anybody else.
Everybody else.
But again, this is your prime opportunity. If she's saying out of her mouth, she's saying it plain as day that, yes, we should cut it, then yes, it was only about 2 years ago that you voted to increase it. Why did you do that? If you know about so much of the corruption involved with the military in the budget, it's just, again, this was a missed opportunity from Bernie Sanders. I believe this was probably his lowest moment, that he missed this opportunity.
There's a lot of things that I wish he would said during that debate. Maybe it'll happen in the next debate, considering maybe some relationships have changed.
Yeah, that is.
But back to the question that Wolf Blitzer asked the question. The question was what is going to make you a good commander in chief?
How are you best prepared?
Especially in regard to the military, and I just keep America safe. What is that? Keep America safe. What is
very ambiguous?
That's very, very ambiguous. She said a lot of ambiguous things. What'd she say? She said, I visited troops. I have family members that are troops. A lot of people do that.
How does that prepare you?
How does that prepare you? A lot of it was vague answers. A lot of it, she went back to her repertoire when she'll do this. You know what I'm talking about. She says, we need to think about X. We need to think about Y. We need to think about this. And we need to think about that. I'm just like, all those stuff we're already thinking about. It's just basic stuff. This is stuff that's already out there. The question was, how are you prepared to be the commander-in-chief? And what makes you, the best candidate on this stage to be commander-in-chief, specifically in regard to the military? And she really didn't give an answer. She started just listing off the various aspects of the military, whatever they have to go through. That's really all she did. And quite frankly, that's all she could do. Right? That's all she could do, especially if we're talking about, coming off the other topic, which was the Iraq War. So what else could she do?
Yeah.
Because she's on the wrong side of that issue too.
This was pretty bold of her to say that, you know, she's for cutting the military budget, though, when, again, this is recent history. This isn't something like she's been in Congress for the past 20 years and she made some vote 20 years ago and, you know, she regrets that vote. And this was just 2 years ago during the Trump presidency.
We're not talking about, you know, when she was a Republican here.
No, we're not talking about that. But like I said, it is bold because easily somebody could have contested that. So somebody could have challenged this notion that she is actually about what she is saying. But nobody took that opportunity. And that was a missed opportunity. All right, so now we're going to go to trade. And conversation goes to the USMCA, the new trade deal that, you know, has been agreed upon. And there is different feelings about it. The first question goes to Bernie Sanders about his opposition to it.
Senator Sanders, you have said that new deal, the USMCA, quote, makes some modest improvements, yet you're going to vote against it. Aren't modest improvements better than no improvements for the farmers and manufacturers who have been devastated here in Iowa?
The answer is we could do much better than a Trump-led trade deal. This deal, and I think the proponents of it acknowledge, will result in the continuation of the loss of hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs as a result of outsourcing. The heart and soul of our disaster trade agreements, and I'm the guy who voted against NAFTA and against permanent normal trade relations with China, is that we have forced American workers to compete against people in Mexico, in China, elsewhere, who earn starvation wages, $1 or $2 an hour. Second of all, every major environmental organization has said no to this new trade agreement because it does not even have the phrase climate change in it. And given the fact that climate change is right now the greatest threat facing this planet, I will not vote for a trade agreement that does not incorporate very, very strong principles to significantly lower fossil fuel emissions in the world.
But Senator Sanders, to be clear, the AFL-CIO supports this deal. Are you unwilling to compromise?
The AFL-CIO does, the Machinists Union does not, and every environmental organization in this country, including the Sunrise Organization, who are supporting my candidacy, opposes it. So I happen to believe, and I hope we will talk about climate change in a moment, if we do not get our act together in terms of climate change, the planet that we're going to be leaving our kids and our children and our grandchildren will be increasingly unlivable and uninhabitable.
We're going to get to climate change, but I'd like to stay on trade. Senator Warren.
Well, they are the same in this issue.
Bruh. Yo.
I liked it.
I liked it, and Bernie Sanders is nicer than he has to be. He's basically saying the cost of it outweigh the benefits. And I think that's a simple answer. That's pretty much what he was saying. The cost outweigh the benefits. And he was making his case to the moderator who asked the question, and it didn't seem like, you know, she was understanding. Like, well, it's some benefits to it. I was like, there's some benefits to everything. There's always going to be small benefits, but in the long run, if it causes more damage, then there is no benefit, right? If the damage supersedes the small benefit that they say is there, then it actually equals no benefit. And I like how he mentioned the fact that he's sticking to his guns based on who is supporting his campaign. You know what I'm saying?
The Sunrise Movement.
The Sunrise Movement.
Right.
Like, so he has to take that position. Why? Because he understands he represents a group of people. I guess that's foreign to that moderator and maybe some of the people on that damn stage.
Well, and look, he made a good point about the environmental groups that do not support this trade agreement. Because if you're going to craft some major trade policy, then yeah, you do have to address climate change because it's a very significant issue. The fact that it doesn't really address climate change Why would you support that? If climate change is such a huge issue that is going to be affecting us down the line, I mean, it's affecting us right now, but it's going to become a real problem, a real nuisance, just to kind of understate things. If you don't take care of that, if you don't address that now, then, like you said, the costs outweigh the positives. It doesn't make sense. So the moderator, I agree. This is just the beginning of the, I guess, the war against Bernie in this debate.
Coordinated ambush.
Yes.
That was kind of, I would say that was the first strike.
Yeah, that was pretty much
and you can tell,
laying
I was
the
like,
ground.
I was like, he answered the question. Like, why are you trying to, like,
well, the AFL-CIO, you know,
who cares? Like, I don't
they support it. So
so it doesn't matter. What matters is the arguments that he laid out, and he laid out his arguments, you know, pretty nicely. And to me, even the framing of the question shows that it's like they're completely disconnected. They're completely disconnecting everything, like capitalism from the environment. Bernie Sanders is trying to keep those two things related to one another because they are, but
that's why this was not a separate issue. She was trying to say we got to stay on track, but no, climate change is involved in this conversation. So now we're going to get to Elizabeth Warren because, hey, Elizabeth Warren is a progressive, correct? And she's talked about trade policy before. She's talked about climate change before. Now she, on the other hand, and, you know, compared to Bernie on this issue, they you know, they're not the same here. She actually does support.
That's sexist. Nope, that's sexist, Will.
It's sexist to do that?
It's sexist to kind of point out their differences.
No.
And it's attacking Warren,
okay.
And it's sexist.
Well,
I just want to point that out.
That's what we're just going to do.
Okay.
Here, but anyway, yes, Senator Elizabeth Warren, she does agree and support this new trade policy. She has said before that, and actually most people have said that it's modest gains, modest improvements. But here she's going to lay out why she is in support of it and why Bernie's wrong.
Senator Warren, you support the USMCA. Why is Senator Sanders wrong?
I do. I wasn't here. I've been in Congress long enough to have voted against NAFTA, but I led the fight against the trade deal with Asia and the trade deal with Europe because I didn't think it was in the interests of the American people, the American workers, or environmental interests. But we have farmers here in Iowa who are hurting, and they are hurting because of Donald Trump's initiated trade wars. We have workers who are hurting because the agreements that have already been cut really don't have enforcement on workers' rights. This new trade deal is a modest improvement. Senator Sanders himself has said so. It will give some relief to our farmers. It will give some relief to our workers. I believe we accept that relief. We try to help the people who need help, and we get up the next day and fight for a better trade deal. We need a coherent trade policy. We need a policy that actually helps our workers, our farmers. We need them at the table, not just a trade policy written for big international companies. I'm ready to have that fight, but let's help the people who need help.
Thank you. Senator
right
Sanders,
now.
can you please respond to Senator Warren?
Well, I think that it is not so easy to put together new trade legislation. If this is passed, I think it will set us back a number of years. Senator Warren is right in saying we need to bring the stakeholders to the table. It is the family farmers here in Iowa and in Vermont and around the country. That is the environmental community. That is the workers. Bottom line here is I am sick and tired of trade agreements negotiated by the CEOs of large corporations.
Senator Klobuchar,
behind
I'd like
doors.
to bring you in.
I have to say that I was very happy with Bernie Sanders' response there.
I was surprised.
I was very surprised too, but he went exactly where I wanted him to go in that scenario. When I'm watching, I'm like, oh, that was it. You landed the punch right there, because think about Elizabeth Warren's rationale here. She's saying that, yeah, you know, modest improvements. It's going to give some relief to workers, to farmers, relief that they need, you know, because they're hurting right now. Okay, we understand it. We get that. But she says that go ahead and support this trade deal right now, and then right after that, fight for a better one. And so Bernie Sanders' response is, do you know how hard it is to draft these policies and actually ratify them, actually come to an agreement and approve them, how they come together, it takes a long time. We're talking about years. Trade agreements are just not struck just every couple of months or so. So you're going to do more damage if you sign off on something with modest improvements, but it still hurts more people. You're not changing much here. So you're going to sign off on this. This is going to continue into existence for how many years? We don't know until the next one is approved of. And again, we don't know when that's going to be. So why would you set us back years just by supporting some modest improvements? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever if you are actually on the side of actually improving things.
Well, it's a trade agreement, so doesn't it involve multiple countries?
It does.
Okay. One thing that stuck out to me in her answer is how she kept saying relief for our workers, relief for our workers, our farmers, our workers. But what about the workers in other countries? What about the workers in Mexico? She said she was against other trade deals, right? Right? Well, why was she against those other trade deals?
She didn't explain that.
She kind of did. She kind of hinted at it, but like, she
didn't explain that in the vein of why she supports this one.
Yes. I have some friends who are from Mexico. Families came over here from Mexico, and they always talk about how the trade deals that the United States struck hurt their families and hurt Mexican farmers all the time. They always talk about that. And so I definitely take issue with kind of her verbiage and how she framed it around our workers. Kind of makes me think about how she was talking about foreign policy, like keep our country safe, keep our country safe. But I was like, if it's a kind of a military industrial complex is a global apparatus, it wouldn't just be about our country. And so if this is about a trade deal that involves multiple countries, it wouldn't just involve our workers. You see what I'm saying? Like her focus seems to kind of like act as an erasure to certain groups of people that might be affected who wouldn't be considered our workers. You know what I'm saying?
But also,
or our farmers that we know and farmers that, we can relate to.
But also the environment, which is not just ours. She didn't say anything about that as far as I could tell. She wasn't commenting about what it would do in terms of climate change and exacerbating that nightmare. Didn't respond to that whatsoever, because again, modest improvements. We all know what we all know what that is. Incrementalism. We all know what that is. We don't like it. We want radical change. We know that we don't often get radical change. It often is incremental, but we fight for radical change. You don't just approve of modest improvements that aren't going to really help. People are still going to be hurting. Again, somebody that is supposedly as progressive as Senator Elizabeth Warren is, somebody that is supposedly as strong on the environment and climate change as she is, seems that she would understand this, but in her commentary, she did not. All right, so let's get to, this was the, on the same subject, we're going to get to Tom Steyer, who does not support the USMCA.
Even though farmers and manufacturers here in Iowa and around the country could see some relief from the China deal, they've been crushed by the current administration's trade war. What will you do as president to help them get back on their feet?
Look, on the first day, I would undo Mr. Trump's tariffs. On the first day, I would get rid of his waivers that Senator Klobuchar was referring to oil refiners, so not having to use corn-based ethanol. In fact, these trade deals have been exactly what Senator Sanders and Warren have been saying, which is that they've been designed to grow the American GDP for the corporations of America, not for the working people of America, and not to protect the climate. So let me say this. I'm the only person on this stage who says climate's my number one priority. I would not sign this deal, because if climate's your number one priority, you can't sign a deal, even if it's marginally better for working people, until climate is also taken into consideration. Look, I've got 4 kids between the ages of 26 and 31. I cannot allow this country to go down the path of climate destruction. Everybody in their generation knows it. Frankly, Mayor Buttigieg, you're their generation. I think you would be standing up more. That's why I'm standing up for it. We cannot put climate on the back seat all the time and say, we're going to sign this one more deal, we're going to do one more thing without putting climate first. That's why it's my #1 priority. We can do it in a way that makes us richer, but we have to do it.
Whoa. Okay. That was Steyer's answer, but who do you think that answer, other than Steyer, who do you think that answer benefited? I don't think the answer just benefited Steyer as far as making him look a certain way, but who do you think that answer benefited?
Well, that benefits Bernie as well.
Okay.
Because it seems to be they're on the same side of this. And I like Steyer's comments here because he's saying that everybody thinks that, hey, we can just, look, climate change is a really big issue. We all agree on that. We all have plans for that. But we need to do something, and these are modest improvements. Hey, let's just do this one last thing. We know it doesn't address climate change. We know it doesn't do anything to help on that front. But it's just one more thing. We'll get to it. We'll get to it. And he's just calling bullshit on that. And he specifically points to Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is another one that does support the USMCA. And he's specifically pointing at him because of, I guess, a newer generation, and you should know better. He's basically saying to him, you should know better. This is it's going to be a problem for all of us, but definitely younger people and people that come after us. It's definitely going to be more of an issue for them as well. So he should be on the right side of this, but he's not. So I did like Tom Steyer's comments. It does seem as though he understands the issue. And, it's right up his alley. We know his background when it comes to environmental issues. Next Gen America, which is the environmental advocacy group that he started about 10 years ago, I believe. So, again, this is his wheelhouse here. So I think he shined, and this was probably his brightest moment of the debate.
And I think it's important that he mentioned that who benefits from these trade deals. When you kind of go over the provisions of a deal and you see that there are special exemptions for fossil fuel companies, you know what it's about. You know what I'm saying? So when you see that, you know who those trade deals are designed to benefit and who those trade deals are designed to protect. And that's all Bernie Sanders is trying to point out.
So this is where we are going to, not stop, but this is where we are going to spend a significant portion of our time tonight. And of course, you know it's coming. You know it's coming. And we knew it was coming during the debate as well, because this was such a big issue leading up to the debate. So a few days ago, before this debate took place, there was some reports, and I believe it was a CNN report, about how a meeting between Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren back in December of 2018 at her home. During that meeting, Senator Bernie Sanders told Elizabeth Warren that he did not believe a woman could win the presidency in 2020. This report did not cite sources. I at least did not name sources.
The initial individuals they got the information from apparently weren't even in there.
No,
it was like third hand.
It was just a meeting between the two senators and nobody else. Anybody else that was, or I guess was privy to what was conversed, the conversation in that meeting, they got it, secondhand. They got it from either Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. So there were 4 unnamed sources that, I guess were the source material for this article. But that's what was reported. And so leading up to this debate, a lot of conversation was, hey, did Bernie Sanders say it? Could he have said it? This and that, blah, blah, blah. Like just a lot of speculative kind of conversation. So we knew it was coming. We just didn't know when it was coming. We didn't know how long it was going to take to, or how long the debate was going to focus on this. But we knew it was coming. So without further ado, let's get to the question that was served up to Bernie Sanders on this.
CNN reported yesterday that, and Senator Warren confirmed in a statement, that in 2018, you told her that you did not believe that a woman could win the election. Why did you say that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I didn't say it. And I don't want to waste a whole lot of time on this because this is what Donald Trump and maybe some of the media want. Anybody knows me, knows that it's incomprehensible that I would think that a woman could not be president of the United States. Go to YouTube today. There's some video of me 30 years ago talking about how a woman could become president of the United States. In 2015, I deferred, in fact, to Senator Warren. There was a movement to draft Senator Warren to run for president. And you know what? I stayed back. Senator Warren decided not to run, and I did run afterwards. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by 3 million votes. How could anybody in a million years not believe that a woman could become president of the United States? And let me be very clear. If any of the women on this stage or any of the men on this stage win the nomination, I hope that's not the case. I hope it's me. But if they do, I will do everything in my power to make sure that they are elected in order to defeat the most dangerous president in the history of our country.
So Senator Sanders, I do want to be clear here. You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
So, okay, again, we knew it was going to come up. I think it's important to also state that before this debate took place, Elizabeth Warren confirmed the reports that Bernie Sanders, in fact, did make that statement. And so it was floated out there for a while before she actually responded to it. But in a statement, in part, she said, quote, among the topics that came up was what would happen if Democrats nominated a female candidate. I thought a woman could win. He disagreed. She then continued by saying, I have no interest in discussing this private meeting any further because Bernie and I have far more in common than our differences on punditry, end quote. So you can't talk about this without stating that, without knowing that she did confirm the reports that, yes, he in fact did do this. And what I do like about what Bernie Sanders said, now he made a statement before the debate as well, saying that, no, this is ridiculous to suggest that I could say such a thing. But what I like what he said on this national debate stage is that he pointed to how ridiculous it is. He pointed to earlier comments he made decades ago about how he believed that a woman could, in fact, win the presidency. He pointed to the fact that in 2015, he was part of a movement to draft Senator Elizabeth Warren for president. She didn't want to. We all know that. And so that's when he decided to get in. He also pointed to the fact that he lost to Hillary Clinton. Okay, he lost the Democratic nomination to Hillary Clinton in 2016. Campaigned for her vigorously. She ended up losing to Donald Trump. Of course, we know that. That's our reality right now. But she won the popular vote by 3 million votes. Knowing all that information, it would be crazy. It's ludicrous to think that with that information and noting that Elizabeth Warren is a close friend of Bernie Sanders, he was in a meeting with her, one-on-one, telling her that she or any woman could not win the presidency in 2020. It sounds ridiculous. In 2015 and in 2016, not many people knew who Bernie Sanders was. And if you did know who Bernie Sanders was, you didn't have a lot of information about him because he was a little-known senator from Vermont. And I don't know how many times I've said this was a little-known senator. I've said this many, many times. I can't tell you that I knew a lot about Bernie Sanders in 2015 either. I didn't know a lot about him.
Of him?
I heard of him.
I heard his name mentioned every now and then. But
I may have heard him speak a little bit, but like attributing something to Bernie Sanders, I probably could not have done that. It wasn't until he made his entrance into election season and he had these rallies and he was talking progressive and he was actually meaning that. And then you went back in his history and found that he was saying the same thing 20, 30 years ago. That's when it was like, oh my gosh, man, look who this guy is. And that was such a stark difference than what was Hillary Clinton and what we all knew Hillary Clinton was. But again, in that period of time, everybody knew who Elizabeth Warren was. She was like the progressive beacon. That's why everybody wanted her to run. A lot of people thought that she could actually beat Hillary Clinton, who everybody knew was going to run in 2016. She didn't want to do it. There was a large movement to draft her. She didn't want to do it. She didn't get involved. So he stepped up. The notion that this guy, given all that information, would say in a private meeting with his friend on the subject of, hey, maybe I might run, or, what's going to happen? And in that meeting, he said to her face, yeah, woman can't do it. It sounds ridiculous.
How disingenuous and snaky is it for someone to lob a very scurrilous accusation out there and then say, I'm not going to talk about it any further? Other than me throwing out a very incendiary accusation out there, that's it. It was a private dinner. It's private. I'm not going to talk about it except for highlighting the most notable thing. So let's move on. Like that's
At
like
this time too.
that's like throwing a rock and hiding your hand right there.
Right.
Like regardless of the facts that are out there about Hillary Clinton's numbers in regard to the election, because that doesn't really have anything to do, well, maybe it does, but it doesn't really have anything to do with Bernie Sanders' personality or his positions. So I think it's important to stick to that. And he kind of brought it up when he talked about, hey, you can go on YouTube and find the video of me talking to children, probably the people that matter the most,
Right.
Who are the most impressionable, talking to kids about not just how women are viewed, but how all people are viewed. But specifically, he did highlight women being, qualified to be president, and he's done that throughout his life. So it's not about, I don't know, maybe it's about this now, but if you have an issue and you have two people saying different things, what's the best thing to do? What's the best thing to do in that situation? Like, is there anything that supports the accusation?
Right.
That's what you look for. Is there anything that supports the accusation, or is there anything that contradicts the accusation? That's what you look for. Like, can we point to anything that would even support such a notion? We can't. But guess what? We can point to things that contradict the notion.
We can.
Like, it just doesn't make sense. Why would he even have that position if he was encouraging her to run? It doesn't even make sense based on what we know and what Elizabeth Warren knows. So to me, it's just like it's almost laughable. It's also laughable because, like you said, he campaigned for Hillary Clinton. So if he thought that, he sure didn't behave like it.
He did not.
He went to 40 plus rallies in 13 different states to campaign for Hillary Clinton. So he has a weird way of showing that that he thinks that a woman can't win. It doesn't make sense. At one of those campaign rallies where they were at together, Hillary Clinton said this, and I've got to say too, this election has been a lot more fun now that we're on the same side. And I want to thank Bernie for everything he's done. He's crisscrossing our country, energizing people, getting folks off the sidelines and engaged in politics. And there's no question that his efforts are paying off. So was Hillary Clinton lying then, or is Elizabeth Warren and a lot of her supporters and surrogates lying now? Which is it? So if Elizabeth Warren and her supporters are telling the truth, then Hillary Clinton is a big fat liar. I mean, we know that in certain regard. I'm talking about in the words she used right here in regard to Bernie Sanders helping her win the presidency. I also picked up something else from that because I've read this a few times but didn't pick this up. Hillary Clinton is pretty much saying here, Bernie didn't damage me enough.
Yep.
She's saying it helped.
Yeah.
She's saying Bernie helped me.
She is not saying that now, though. But, look, no matter what information we have about comments made from Bernie Sanders or past efforts to get Hillary Clinton elected, past efforts to draft Senator Elizabeth Warren to run for president, really, that's just more information we have, more stuff to prove how unlikely this was. But let's just deal with raw data. Hillary Clinton won the Democratic nomination. She won the Democratic nomination. She was the Democratic Party's nominee.
What year was that?
This was 2016.
And what year did this meeting supposedly take place?
This took place late 2018.
So almost
2 years after. Yes, the next election cycle for president. You're telling me that a man that knows that he lost to a woman.
And helped that woman.
And that woman beat Donald Trump, the eventual president, beat that man by 3 million votes. All this statistical information here. He knows this, but he's still in 2018 like, you know what? I know what I've said all throughout the course of my life, but I don't really think a woman could do it. I'm gonna tell my friend that's looking to become the next president. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But okay, let's just get to the other side of this now, okay? Because of course you're gonna hear from Elizabeth Warren. So let's hear how she responded to this question on if Bernie Sanders said it or not, and you'll see.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
And I wanted to stop it right there. Because, like you were saying, what did you call this effort by CNN? Not orchestrated.
No, I gotta put on my I gotta put on my John Witherspoon.
Right.
A coordinated ambush.
Okay. Now, Bernie Sanders just got finished saying how ludicrous it was to suggest that he stated the words that a woman could not win the presidency. He just got done saying that. He just got done presenting evidence of why it would be so ludicrous for him to say that. He explained his position. No. Then he was asked to clarify that position. So are you saying that you did not say that? He said, that's correct.
So, Elizabeth Warren, let me ask you.
The question to Elizabeth Warren is, how did it feel
when he said it?
When he said it?
So now we've already like decided that he said it.
Yes.
That's it.
So,
hey, Will. When did you stop beating your wife? I need you to answer that. When did you?
Well, I didn't.
Your wife. How did it feel when Will beat you? Will smacked you upside the head. Like that's basically what they did.
And see, we're talking about a debate now, okay? Now, we know very well where corporate media is on the side of. We know they're not really on the side of progressivism because they never have been. We understand that. But it seems to me that during debates, they at least attempt. Maybe not so, they don't do it so well at times, but at least they attempt to appear like they are not on the side of anybody. They try to appear like they are neutral. This was completely going against that grain. This was saying, oh, we've had enough of that. No, we're completely on the side of Elizabeth Warren.
Well, it was their story. They dropped it.
It was their story.
Although irresponsible because it wasn't even sourced. They dropped the story, so it's kind of not surprising that they were going to stick to the story and make that a focal point of the debate.
Well, what I'm wondering is, why did you even give the question to Bernie Sanders.
Oh, true that.
If you're going to state to Elizabeth Warren, if you're going to just say, hey, how did it feel when Bernie Sanders did this? If you're going to say that, if that's your narrative, then there's no sense in getting any conversation, any kind of commentary from Bernie Sanders, because you're going to stick to what you're trying to sell.
At the end of the day, like, it doesn't even make sense. Because if Bernie is this steaming pile of misogyny, right? Mm-hmm. And she knew this.
Yes.
Why not make it a central part of her campaign? Or just even a small part? Or just like a compliment to her campaign all along?
Well, this is a good friend of hers, you know. And
Come on, this is a critical issue.
Yeah,
somebody saying a woman can't be president, and it wouldn't even be about just Elizabeth Warren in that case. Because Klobuchar is there. Yeah. Tulsi is there
as well.
Harris was there. Gillibrand was there.
Marianne Williamson.
All these women were there, so it wouldn't be about Warren in this case.
It'd be about women.
Be about women, and I will highlight, because I can't go without mentioning this, Tulsi Gabbard.